This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, let me go ahead and call the meeting to order at 9:04. The agenda I've already posted and sent out. Are there any additions to the agenda? Okay. So
Is
first
there
thing is,
John?
yes.
Did you hear from Microsoft?
No, I did not.
Okay.
So is this Rajiv?
Yes, John, this is me. Yeah.
Okay. So first items is the open requests for the open source firmware meetup. I believe in the last minutes I had sent out the link to add additional ideas for the meetup. Sai, Rajiv, did you want to make any comments on that?
Yeah. I think I have not got any, not even one session from our OpenRMC work group. But as based on the agenda, it looks like at least the specification, like northbound API specification, we need to review and then finalize. Maybe we can use that as one opportunity. And I would like to see like if Alfie, you and me and Microsoft can add that item. Maybe we can get together and then finish that task.
Okay, and so the idea is to review the spec.
At least, yeah, I think the idea is to kind of even work on the code, but what are the pending items? I think it looks like we have a lot of pending items, right? So we don't even have the API spec. So maybe we can use that to, that meetup to kind of use the opportunity to finish that.
Okay.
So, there are a lot of other topics from OpenBMC and also like the OSF, the BIAS people. They put a lot of other topics. So OpenRMC does not have any. So I think this would be one of the topics that I think might make sense if all of us agree.
Okay. Okay, so once we have the topics, how are you going to arrange the times since we have presentations at the same time?
Actually, that idea is like if people are, it's their choice actually. If you want to attend some interesting topics, interesting talks, you can go there. If you are working on some of these things, you can be there. So it's all planned by that team on that topic. So you have 2 days to kind of plan it.
Okay. Okay. Because I know the OpenBMC has an afternoon session. OpenRMC has an afternoon session, and so so we as a team arrange when we meet up during those 2 days to work around that. Okay.
Yeah. Like say if you need like 2 or 3 hours, we can plan all of us together and see like say based on what talks we are interested in, we can find a time which matches all of us together.
Okay. Okay. And then I think I'm gonna have to do. Sorry about this, guys. Disappear. So I was going to talk about the rest of the session. Oh, I don't have it. Oh, I know. We'll just do this. So I want to go over what sessions we're going to have for OpenRMC. So you guys see this? I don't know if my playing around has left you guys. Okay. So OpenRMC has the last 4 sessions of the hardware management track since we're part of the hardware management project. Could whoever joined this meeting, you guys have a lot of backup noise. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to do a review of the subproject, and I'll be showing those slides today. In addition, and then after that, Microsoft will be doing their presentation on, so the last 3 all seem to be use cases. So that's how I've characterized them. So Microsoft would be doing the use case of Microsoft 365 service. We'll have an OpenStack deployment automation. I believe that's Huawei, I may be wrong. And then Intel will be doing one on power capping use cases. In addition, I've asked Rafael, who's on the line, to do a presentation on the rack scale RMM API as backup in case one of these presentations in the rest of the track don't make it. His slides are still relevant because if everybody makes it, then I'm going to slot his into the back end of my slide set, and it'll segue directly into his input. Okay. So we'll be looking at those 2 slide sets at the end of this meeting. Any questions about the track? Oh, one thing I've asked as feedback to each of the track owners is that I wanted these presentations before the OpenRMC group, before they go to get presented at OCP Summit. I believe both the project leads and the CTO don't want anything presented at OCP Summit that the community hasn't already seen before, at least an idea. I mean, they don't have to present the entire thing, but it should not be, we should not be surprised at what gets presented at our track. So this would just be a heads up of what they would be presenting. And my goal is not to actually post those any of the slide set reviews on the wiki because people just go to the wiki and look at it and not attend the summit. So for the 2 slides today, we'll go over it, we'll answer questions, but I actually won't post it on the wiki. Any questions? Okay, next is update. This is the OpenRMC northbound API, Alfie. Give us a status.
Yeah, sure. Let me see. I'm planning to have a draft out by tomorrow, and then for review. And I can't throw it up on the screen right now, just to go through it quickly. And can you pass me the control?
Do I need to?
Well, I guess.
Michael, if you can tell me how to do this, I will do this. So yeah.
That's okay if as there's too much.
No, I got it. I figured it out.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is the API, northbound API. This is just the draft that I'm working on, and what you're looking at is the table of content. And so number 4 as the I think that is the most important piece, as is the manageability capability, and I'll go through that a little bit, and then the rest is just the specifying the northbound API, which is the mainly is the Redfish API, and I'm not sure if I want to, I'm thinking about removing the IPMI or DCMI because that would be more for the legacy purposes that I left it there, and we may just remove all of the other ones and leave just Redfish as the default, and the only requirements that you need to have in order to be compliant. So we can leave all the other protocols, IPMI, CLI, web interfaces, and all of that to the particular implementation. So that will be optional. Right. So and then the going down the line, it's the specification of all the resource collections, right, that we're going to be exposing through the northbound API, and then some of the behavioral specifications, like what you're supposed to get and what you be getting back and all that. So going down to the manageability. So here's the list that I came up with, and then along with the resources that they're supposed to be getting back. So based on all these, like the inventory, power, node level, telemetries, health, and down to updating the firmware and all of that. So I'll be mapping all this to the resource collections and schemas, and making sure that they're all covered. And then I'll be building a table, with all the resources that, for example, the hardware inventory would be getting to see or getting back. So that's the plan, and then I'm planning to complete this by tomorrow, and then send it out to the group, to the community for comment. And that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments, questions?
No, the outline looks pretty good.
It
Thanks,
looks
Alfie.
good,
All right.
yes.
Okay, so one thing in our discussion the last meeting was on the difference between, I guess, INSPER's perception of going through the abstraction and Facebook's usage of not going through the abstraction and going directly to the individual nodes. And that's why I think that's why we have this two separation here. And so understanding that there's a lot of people, a lot of different companies being represented here, I wanted to do kind of a survey of how, trying to prioritize all this stuff and figuring out, okay, as we go through, what do we believe is the set of capabilities that we want in the first draft of this. So what I have is, let's see. So what I created less than a couple of minutes ago was this document, which I will make public. And as a matter of fact, I will include Alfie your list. But this is basically what are the required use cases for the first release of the northbound specification. And I've separated this into rack level use cases of stuff you want to basically do at the rack level, which basically goes through the abstraction. And then what we want, what is necessary for the open.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should I be passing back the control back to you?
Oh, you have not passed back control.
Okay, let me do that. Okay.
Can you see this?
Yeah, now we see it.
Okay. So again, so these are use cases which I just added my list from my original list I had 2 weeks ago, so I'll add Alfie's here. But it's separated into 2 tables. One is access, that is rack level behavior, that you want to get the inventory of the entire rack, the status of the entire rack. And this will go through the abstraction and then hide the underlying complexity. And then the second is services that would be access to find the individual nodes and perform the following actions on those nodes. So in this case, from what I understand from what Facebook said, right, you go through you would go through the RMC primarily if you lose direct contact with the node. Right, so you would go find your node and go reset it, go power up. So I don't even know what you want to do. So you may end up with just reset. I just left it up here.
Yeah, one more thing missing is like a SOL, like a serial over LAN. So in case if node is not coming up, we want to kind of get to the serial console and then debug it. So yeah, using SOL or remote console.
So when you say serial over LAN, is that the serial over LAN as defined by IPMI, or would SSH work?
Even SSH to the RMC also works. So if RMC is alive, whatever the tool it provides, either a Redfish or a SSH into the RMC, and then it should be able to kind of give us the console of the particular node.
Right. Okay. As long as you get to whatever the node is, fine. So when you do this SSH, is it the SSH to the primary onboard OS that's maybe running, or is it to the out-of-band BMC?
So typically, we have a node has a one serial console that goes to the RMC. So there is a one RS422 or like RS232, whatever the connection, right? Okay. So that's there is only one muxed serial port.
Okay, got it.
So I mean, there is an access to the outer band, right? To the BMC, not to the OS. Is that correct?
I mean, in most of the cases, we have one serial port that comes out of the node, and that is internally muxed to the host as well as BMC. So if one of them is alive, we can get to the other.
So what do you expect? So you have only one serial coming out of each node, and that's that. Okay. So Rajiv, for really good implementations, what happens is you can actually use that same serial port to flip between the two, as opposed to exposing 2 serial ports. So I don't know if that's the implementation, but you can do that. The other way that used to be was that BIOS would come up and it would just hand off everything to the OS, and so everyone uses the same serial port. And so you don't have to have 2 coming out, one for out of band and one for in band. You can use a single serial port to mux between the 2. And it's usually a keystroke, some special keystroke that flips you back and forth between the 2.
Right.
Okay.
So I don't know. So whatever they want, I'll give it to them, right? So it's SSH to 1 or 2 serial connections, depending on what. Depending on what's available. So, so once I post this, if you guys could go in and if you're one of these 4 companies, input your data as to what you believe is a priority. As Intel, I basically from an update is a maybe. I want everything else for phase 1. You guys may have other opinions. If you're a company not in this list, go ahead and add a column. But out of this, we should have a kind of a quick ballot of what the priorities should be for phase 1. And then out of this is something I would present at the meetup to see if there's any other input from the community regarding prioritization. So out of this, we will state basically our working priority, and then we'll let the community decide, how they want to participate in that. Okay, any questions?
So John, you assume those are already there are existing products from Facebook, from Microsoft. They will be presenting, and that's the reason you have their columns there, correct?
Whether they're presenting or not, right? What I want to boil it up to is, what does Microsoft want for the first implementation, first release of the northbound API?
Okay.
Right, because they
So
present the
these will be
inventory.
just. So this is something you are setting priority from these vendors, right?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you. I got you.
Okay. Because I mean, one of the reasons is that there's firmware update in Redfish. I'm actually running a task force to update some of the issues, or deal with some of the issues with firmware update. Question is, how far fast should I drive this task force in order to meet whatever needs are required by OpenRMC? So that would help me gauge how fast I should get the models, kind of cleaned up, because it exists, it works, I believe, but people are finding some issues that they want resolved.
Okay. Can I ask
John, do you want to add a? Go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Rajiv.
Okay, it's not Rajiv, it's Mohammed. So, John, I will be representing Huawei OpenRMC. So on the OpenRMC forum, and do you want to add a column for Huawei next to the Microsoft, so that I can put down what we prefer to have as available on the northbound REST APIs?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Was there another other comment?
So the comment is you want to add a new column for, okay.
Yeah, no, I've got that. I thought, I figured you were done, and there was some other speaker who wanted to talk.
Yeah, this is Sai.
Yes.
Yeah. So can you go back to the columns?
Sure.
Yeah. So when you say firmware update, it's for all the components in the rack, right? It's not for the RMC.
Yep. So this is, so thank you, of components of rack components.
Okay. So that includes RM.
I will just make that different, and that way we're not confused.
Okay.
How's that? Oops.
Great. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments?
John, this is Rafael. So maybe one comment from Intel as well. The reset or shutdown doesn't have to be the rack level. It may be the drawer level as well.
Right. So you and I can go sit down and figure out what we want to do down here. So I left this blank because after I created this list up here, I said, yeah, Facebook wants direct access. So I only added stuff up here. I didn't even think about this yet. So we can sit down and figure out what the Intel response should be. And it's not a matter of what can be done. It's a matter of what we want to be done, right? So any other comments? Okay, thank you. Okay, so next is the OpenBMC presentation. And hopefully, oh yeah, I have to now share this, don't I? There it goes. Okay, are you guys seeing this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, this is totally different than the way WebEx works. Okay. So this is a few short slides. I'm presenting. I think Alfie wants to present, and if Raphael's slides get merged into here, he'll present also. This hasn't changed. This is basically directly out of our motivation slide. This slide hasn't changed. This is the various instantiations where the OpenRMC might reside. This is a redo of the original slide. Oops, this is gone. But basically, the charter is that we will specify the rack manager controller service architecture, which includes the northbound interface and the southbound capability requirements. And then we will deliver a rack manager implementation available as open source. And what's outside the charter is the hardware design, which will be within the charter of the other OCP platform projects. So if the OpenRMC resides on a node, drawer, server, that will go to a server group. If it belongs on a switch, it'll go to a network group. If it belongs on the power module, it'll belong to rack and power, and they can deal with that. Okay, any questions? Logistics, which hasn't changed. Yeah, we're a subproject of the hardware management project. Alfie and I are interim co-chairs, pointed to the wiki, and then who's currently participating. And
you might want to add Huawei here, I guess.
Yeah, let me see. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I have to do this. So I have to redo this alphabetically.
Yeah.
Also, probably add ARM as well. We're interested.
John, we did review this presentation yesterday, and I think it's very good.
Sorry, I joined the first time. Where are these files at? Can you send a link in an email sometime?
I'll look into it. Right now, it's still in review mode, but I think I need to check with the staff to see if we can share it. But I'll follow up on that, Don.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
John, are you there?
John, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, sorry guys, I muted myself. Okay, so I made a comment earlier at the beginning of the meeting that these two presentations that you will be seeing are submitted as part of OCP Summit, and so they will actually not be posted on the OpenRMC wiki, because then people just go to the wiki and I need to attend the OCP Summit. So this is a review so that we have that this community has a heads up on what's going to be presented and can provide any comments or changes to the slides themselves. I've asked that the other 3 presentations for this part of the track also present to this group. I do not want this group surprised by anything that gets presented in the open RMC section of the track. Okay, so
right,
I present.
John, yeah, I mean, we did review it. All the contents are good, but there are some cosmetic changes that probably needs to be done. You will hear it later, but right. From the content-wise, everything is great.
Okay, yeah. So this is purely for the audience today. That is not part of the track review. Okay, so this specifies the northbound interface as being specified as a URI in a JSON document, and then a specification of the behavior of the interaction across the API. And the northbound interface is defined as also by a profile, which defines the. So these are the things that would be generated as part of the northbound interface.
So
yes.
So
Question?
this spec, yeah. So this spec is supposed to be. I mean, the plan is to kind of put it in the DMTF, just like other OCP profiles.
What do you mean pushed?
Sorry, I thought like the OCP profiles for compute, storage, and all they are part of the DMTF.
No, they are not.
They're not.
No. What has happened is DMTF released recommendations for an OCP profile. Okay, and then OCP Hardware Management Group created their own and has taken ownership of it. So all OCP profiles come directly from OCP, and the DMTF has no influence over it.
Okay.
And that is because the DMTF recognizes themselves as a descriptive organization, that they describe manageability. They are hard pressed to prescribe anything because prescription is basically to tell people what to do, right? They have no prescriptive power. OCP has prescriptive power because it has OCP accepted and OCP expired, and they appear in RFPs. So OCP has the power to go and state what should and should not exist within an implementation.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So I've actually asked the DMTF to remove the OCP specifications, or at least rename them, because I don't want this confusion of OCP appearing on their website, right?
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. So basically, what this does is this reduces a profile to basically a path to a resource and exactly what the JSON exists at the end of that resource. And so this is where it overlaps with Raphael's presentation, and it depends on how deep we want to go into this. So this basically specifies the top level interface of comparing what exists, what we think might be an OpenRMC, what is in the rack scale RMM API, and what is in Olympus's API. So everyone has taken the Redfish specification and implemented some part of it, right? What OpenRMC is trying to do is to state a prescriptive requirement for OCP that certain things be implemented. Okay. And then once we specify what the paths are, then we specify exactly what the structure is within each of those. So there are two ways I could do this. One is I go specify from service root, right, all the resources that are now underneath OpenRMC. And then the scope vectors of having a discussion of the same discussion we've had here about what is the interaction between the client and the service. So since I have the rest of the community in the room, right, this would set up for any present meeting in the meetup of whether we deal with the RMC service abstraction or whether we deal directly with accessing servers. So within this small community here, we already have diametrically opposing ways of doing this, whether we use this primarily for operational manageability or only during debug, whether we have direct access, on whether the OpenRMC needs to maintain an accurate abstraction model. But all questions that we dealt with last week or last time we met that we may have to go meet again. And then what rack level capabilities are supported, which is why I have that table. So this is the thing that drove me to the table that I showed you just previously, was saying, instead of as part of this, we should at least have an idea of what this community within this set of meetings have figured out. Okay. And this is just a diagram of the previous issue, if we want to delve into it, which is on one side, we deal with an abstraction, and on the other side, we don't deal with an abstraction. And these are two use cases where we deal directly with the server, and upon failure, we go talk to the RMC. here we talk to the RMC, and upon failure, we go directly to the server. Okay. Any questions? All right. So the second half presentation is raw files. Yeah. Okay. So Rafa, I'm just doing the presentation. I updated, which all I did here was I updated the fonts. So on Rafael's presentation, he basically grabs most of my slides to reprep the audience, which is why this set of slides fit nicely into my set if we decide that everyone makes it to the everyone in our track provides the slides on time. Okay. So he ends here and then goes directly into examples, because what I want to show the audience is, okay, we've decided to go this way. This is all you need to know as a person who might be doing a Redfish client, is how you're going to go about providing these use cases. So we go through these 4 use cases, right? And we try to go through and show basically what you would do from an interaction standpoint, and then what you would see when you come back from the JSON packet. So Rafa, do you want to do this?
Yes, of course. So, hello everyone. My name is Rafa Stein. I'm part of the Intel Rackscape Design Architecture, and I'm closely working with John on the DMTF, right, Redfish definitions. So, as John already prepped you, right, on this presentation, the first part, and this was supposed to be the, let's say, use case driven, right? So let's start from retrieving the inventory on the rack chassis level, and the way the Redfish defines the chassis. Chassis can be can represent any resource. So we use the chassis to show, let's say, hierarchy of all the, let's say, hardware assets. So the chassis type may be either rack, drawer, sled, or zone, which is the logical grouping of the, for example, sleds into the power or thermal domains. So the Redfish client, right, can get the chassis collection. It will see the number of chassis exposed by RMM API. Now, going into the first of the, let's say, first reported chassis, in this example, we see chassis with ID 13. We can see this is the chassis of type rack. And by the way, I highlighted the most important, information on each of the mockup. So we see this is the rack level chassis. Now we see it's not contained by any other, entity, right? So this is the, let's say, highest level. We see the list of the chassis contained within this chassis. And I just, this is like chassis 14 to 20. I cut the list in order for the mock to, to fit the screen. We see the link to the manager of this chassis, and then what the manager manages within the chassis. Now we have some Intel extensions like property whether the rack supports aggregated power and cooling, and some properties like UID, which is, by the way, deprecated because now chassis formally contains UID. So John, can we move forward?
Yeah. So one thing I was going to say about this is that Redfish allows you to extend the Redfish specification with OEMs. So this stuff will probably not appear in the OpenRMC spec unless there's a specific desire to have some functionality in here up there, in which case we need to take this, submit it into Redfish, make sure they have a way of expressing that same information, and then it will come back as a requirement up here, which is outside OEM, so it's not, quote, proprietary information. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's why it's here. I actually wanted to line out all this stuff, but I left it here so I could have that discussion. So by the time we get to OCP Summit, I don't even want to have that discussion because I don't want to confuse the audience as to what they should be looking at. So, okay.
Yes. Yes. So as we talked about this, rack level chassis, it gave us information on what other chassis are, let's say, contained within the specific rack, right? So if we move forward, John, we can see, for example, the next chassis, because you know that the chassis with ID 13 was showing the number of chassis that it's managing, right? Now, as we look at the chassis with ID 14, so we do the HTTP GET operation on the chassis 14, we see that this is the chassis type now, it's drawer, right? So it's just let's say it reflects the design of specific rack. This rack, let's say, was assembled to, let's say, to host the drawers, where each of the drawer can, you know, contain up to 4 sleds. Now we see that from the looking at the chassis mockup, this is the drawer chassis manufactured by Quanta, and then we see what the actions are available on the drawer level. We see that we can, you know, execute the reset, right? And there are 2 possible options. We can either force restart or do the graceful restart. Now, other useful information that the drawer chassis contains is what is the parent of this chassis, right? This chassis is contained by chassis ID 13, so we know this is like rack level, where the current one is the drawer level. We can see now that this chassis is cooled by chassis 19 thermal. This is actually something that Intel models using, because the chassis can be also used to model logical, you know, grouping, logical entities, right? What we, let's say, did in our solution is we use the zoning to group, for example, the number of sleds that have common thermal and the power. So we see what is the chassis or thermal on the chassis, which is representing a zone for the both thermal and the power resources. Okay, and then one of the OEM extensions that Intel introduced, and I agree with John, we are working closely to close it, so make sure this is part of the official DNTF, so non-OEM, you know, extensions, no OEM vendor locking can be, you know, presented here. But for now, we contain the location. So, for example, if this is like this represents the drawer. So a specific rack can, you know, host up to n number of drawers, and this is like the identification of the, let's say, of the drawer location within a chassis. Yeah, the number of the parent, which is for this case, it's a chassis number where you have the pod consisting of the number of racks. Okay, John, can we move on? So now we investigated that there is some drawer chassis that exposes the action, the chassis reset action. We can easily do the, let's say, reset on the specific drawer. So for this, we do the HTTP post command that is directed to the chassis 14 actions chassis reset. And then we have to provide the necessary arguments in the JSON format. And the one that was called out in the previous slide was the reset type. For this, we can choose the force restart. So the restart is applied immediately, and it effectively triggers the reset of the control plane on the drawer level and the blades. Okay, John, can we move forward? Now, so the observation of the chassis on different levels, you know, help us to build the hierarchy of the different, you know, enclosures within the rack drawer and the sleds. Now, the point is we would like to see some, you know, statistics, metrics, right? So each of the, this is the Redfish definition, that the chassis endpoint defines sub-resources like power and thermal, that these are 2 basic, you know, resources reported under chassis. Now, what RMM in RSD implementation does, we group the power and thermal within the zones. For example, in this example, which the mockups were took on the real hardware, we had like group of the drawers that utilize 2, for example, power and thermal zones, and basically racks that represent power and thermal zones. Now, under chassis 20 in this, you know, setup, we see the power which endpoint which reflects the power consumption or power statistics for group of the drawers, right? What are the important metrics or properties under the chassis power endpoint? The ones that are related to the power. So, and the redfish defines that power allocated watts, power available watts, and power capacity watts in a way that capacity watts, this is like the total capacity, of the power that can be consumed. Let's say allocated are the ones that were requested, and available, this is like capacity minus allocated. Also, the one of the attributes of the power control is that those power statistics has the related item property that shows us what are the chassis, or what are the hardware which is represented by this chassis here that is consuming the power. So for this case, we can see that chassis 17 and 18, which are drawers, we can let's say take a look at those records, but these are the drawers. So we know that 2 drawers contribute to this, power statistics that are presented here. And also under the power resource, we see the power supplies properties. So this case of the mockups we show for RMM shows the, let's say, shared power and cooling, of course, right? So we can see that there is a number of supplies that relates to those 2 drawers. For the simplicity of the mockup, I just preserved one entry because it's it would be unreadable. Also, what the power record represents is also some extra actions, like we add this request power supply state change, right, within the allowable values, and for each of those allowable values we can either enable or disable. But this is example of some proprietary action that was added. So John, if we move to the last one, which is the thermal, it's the same concept. We have the thermal zone, which applies in this example. We're looking at chassis 19. So this is chassis that is chassis of type zone. So this is just for the grouping of the logical entities. So the thermal statistics we can see here apply to the number of the chassis, namely 14, 15, and 16, where each of those is a drawer chassis. So our thermal statistics refer to all 3 of those drawers, right? For the thermal, the most important detail that is, let's say, reported in this resource is a array of the fans. For each of the fans in the system, we see the reading and the, let's say, unit. This is like RPM for the reading of fan speed here, and physical context, whether it's exhaust or intake or any other locality of the fan location. Okay. Also, not only the fans, but the thermal resource presents the array of the temperatures, which is the, let's say, array of the reading of the physical sensors that are located within the specific thermal zone. And this is also just showing one temperature just for the sake of the mockup being easy to read, right? So we within the temperature, the most important, of course, is the reading Celsius, and this is using the DNTF suggestion convention. So if there is some metric is using the ISO or well-known, let's say, metrics or let's say units, there is no need to, let's say, add an unit property. It's just a matter of providing the reading and then appending it with the what is the unit. So for now we see this is temperature in Celsius. Okay, and this temperature sensor also relate to those 3 drawers, because this is where it applies to. Of course, there's also physical context that is associated with the sensor, and it's also here set to exhaust, right, to the location of the physical sensor on the PDU. So I guess this is all I had for today. I can add or expand per your recommendations, right, this presentation, depending on the, let's say, form of this, right?
So my first question is on my slide, I end up with at a very abstract level, right, of trying to understand the use case of whether we deal with the abstraction or not. This is the other path, right, which is we go into detail to show the audience that, you know, once we get all this stuff done with OpenRMC and we have an API, this is all the client needs to go off and do. Right, and so the interaction diagram on the left is what I'm more interested in. Is you just do a get, guys. You do a get. You pump this. You get a JSON packet. You pump it through some Python, right, and you get whatever data you need. So if you want temperature reading, you know exactly what it is, and it's easy to get. You can look at the JSON yourself, or you can extract it from a Python code. So any feedback on whether we should have one or both during the presentation?
I have one simple question, like, is this a mock-up model or it's a real code that is working on a rack manager?
The voice was fading, so but I guess the question was, is it just a mock-up or this is the real code? So this is a mock-up of the existing service which is implemented by Intel Rackscale Design, right?
Okay.
So all this is working code.
Yes. If
you put this on a real server, you could get real data.
Yeah. My next question would be like, any of you are planning a demo, like a real demo, in the OCP flow, like any of the rack managers?
You're breaking up a bit, but the question is about a demo.
What the size saying is that we do have the OCP Experience Lab where we are trying to demonstrate OSF and make 3. So if you guys want to showcase with these options in that demo area, you're welcome to do so.
Okay, yeah, we'll close with you and figure out where to go do that.
Yeah,
right.
We could definitely do this on the, let's say, on some remote system, right? Using like the PuTTY and performing the real operations using curl or any other tool.
Do we need to have the system physically there, or we could do it remotely?
I think it's good to have some hardware there and then use the remaining remotely. I mean, if it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be great, actually, having a demo. Lots of good information in the file.
Yeah.
Okay, so for now, I'm going to target at least getting a couple of these slides into my set, because it looks like all the slides for the OpenRMC session have been delivered, and then we'll also look at getting a demo up and running. Okay, so going back to my agenda, that takes us to the end of my agenda. Are there any opens in the last 3 minutes? Okay, are there any requests for agenda items for the next meeting? I believe, as I mentioned, Mohammed introduced himself and said, so he's asked if he could have the take a stab at doing the draft of the southbound API requirements. So that's why the northbound use cases are important, because the northbound use cases drive the southbound requirements. So as we formalize that, Mohammed is looking at giving us a draft in 2 weeks on the February 19th meeting. And if we deem it ready, we can talk about it at the OCP summit. Any comment?
The only thing is, John, Microsoft was supposed to update their Rack Manager code to the new version. Did they do that, or Did they mention anything in their last call?
No. So I thought would they be going through me or would they be going through you, since you own the GitHub?
Never mind. I will start a separate email thread with them. So I'll keep you in the loop.
Okay, good. That'd be good.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So with that, let me adjourn the meeting at 9:59. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Okay, guys. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Bye.